Hello and welcome to Today in the News on Vanguard Life. I am Precious Chukudi. We begin with the front pages of the papers this morning, starting off with Vanguard. Vanguard is leading with presidential tussle, Atiku CSU evidence not admissible, and that's coming from TINUBU, APC, INEC. The writer says Justice Okoro's seven-man Supreme Court panel reserves verdict on Atiku Obi's appeal, says there are conflicting letters from CSU. Articles of fresh allegation has elements of crime, and that's coming from Justice Okoro. Why court should overlook technicalities, and that's coming from Atiku. Court dismisses APM's case for being frivolous. PDP deluded in for spectacular feat as Supreme Court says APC. Of course, we can see a photo story showing at Next G Summit. Page 2, subsidy removal, exchange rate unification. We have achieved desired objective, and that's coming from TINUBU. And of course, on book series, we have on Damascus Road. You can read that on page 15. And on sports, we have goalkeepers crisis. Bring a Yama back to Eagles. Peter Sai tells NFF stories above. State FCT grow IGR by 1.6% to 1.9 trillion naira in 2022. Nigeria wins a $11 billion P&ID case in UK courts. FEC approves a $5 billion annual humanitarian poverty alleviation trust fund. You can read more on page 4. On page 4 still, we have autonomy. State assemblies start begin nationwide strike tomorrow. Kogi governorship poll. Supreme Court affirms Ododo as APC candidate. You can see that on page 8. And lastly, on the front page of Vanguard, we have a attack on TINUBU Wiki. Northern elders disown Gumi. All right, let's take a look at the Nation newspaper. The Nation is leading with Supreme Court grieves Atiku's lawyers over CSU documents. The writer says Apex Court dismisses APM's appeal, reserves judgment in Atiku Obi versus TINUBU. And we have on page 4, Ondo Assembly pushes ahead with Ayeda Tiwa's impeachment. CJ gets another letter to set up panel. On Forex crisis, the federal government injected $10 billion in weeks. Writer says unauthorized dollar transaction to become illegal. Consumer credit scheme soon, says the president. Stories above. Victory in $11 billion P&ID UK case excites president. EFCC. Courts void the multi-billion dollar arbitration. Of course, courts clear for Ododo as the Supreme Court dismisses Adeyemi's appeal. Federal government confirms January start of student loan scheme. All right, let's take a look at Guardian newspaper. The Guardian is leading with host communities kick as proposed PIA review shrinks 3% allocation. And the writer says host community must fund new portal introduced by NUPRC, hire pay lawyers and chartered accountants with at least 10 years experience. On page 3, as injunction elapses, Ondo Assembly reopens Ayeda Tiwa's impeachment process. APC kicks as the Supreme Court reserves judgment in Atiku Obi's appeal. TINUBU targets a $1 trillion economy, hopeful of $10 billion inflow to ease FX crisis. Adeyemi loses again as Supreme Court affirms Osman Ododo APC candidate. All right, so let's take a look at the Punch newspaper. The Punch is leading with TINUBU certificate prove alleged forgery beyond reasonable doubt. Supreme Court tells Atiku. The writer says court reserved judgment on Obi Labour Party's appeal, dismisses APM case. Atiku insists on CSU evidence, ex-VP's disposition invalid, says TINUBU. You can see a photo story showing the Onyo Dam flood sack Ogun communities. Governor declares an emergency. Slain Nigerian student NIDCOM probes murder. Nans demand justice. You can see that on pages 4 and 5. A federal government IHS plan, 1 billion naira tech talent communities. You can see that on page 24. Israel arrests 120 militants. EU backs Gaza aid. Stories above. Federal government plans $10 billion to stabilize Naira. Eyes NNPCL for Forex. FEC okays a $3.45 billion World Bank loan for power. Others. And that's all we can take on the front pages of the papers this morning. Join us after the break. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. If you're just joining, still today in the news on Vanguard Life, I am Precious Chukudi. We're starting off with the story that presidential tussle articles of CSU evidence inadmissible, and that's coming from TINUBU, APC, and INEC. And of course, the president, Bola Tinubu, the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, and the All Progressive Congress, APC, yesterday told the Supreme Court why it should not admit as evidence Tinubu's certificate that was released to the candidate of the People's Democratic Party (PDP) Alhaji Atiku Abubakar by the Chicago State University (CSU). According to them, Atiku did not meet the requisite condition precedent to enable the apex court admit the document in evidence. They spoke before the seven-man panel of the Supreme Court led by Justice Inyang Okoro, which reserves its judgment on the appeals filed by Atiku Abubakar and the Labour Party LP presidential candidate Mr. Peter Obi to nullify Tinubu's election after all the parties adopted their briefs of argument. Other members of the Apex Court panel that heard the matter were Justices Wani Abba Aji, Lawal Garba, Ibrahim Salawa, Adamu Jaro, Abubakar Tijani, and Emmanuel Ajim. This happened on a day the Allied People's Movement (APM) withdrew its appeal against Tinubu following the panel's dismissal of the case as frivolous. Atiku and Obi are challenging INEC's declaration that Tinubu of the APC was the valid winner of the February 25th presidential election. They are praying the Apex Court to set aside the September 6th judgment of the Presidential Election Petition Court (PEPC), which dismissed their petitions that the election was rigged in favor of the ruling party. Aside from challenging President Tinubu's eligibility to participate in the contest, both Atiku, who came second, and Obi, who came third, maintained that Tinubu did not secure the majority of valid vote cast during the election to be declared the winner. Obi and the LP, through their team of lawyers led by Dr. Livy Uzoku, SAN, urged the court to uphold their appeal and set aside the judgment of the PEPC. Obi, in its 51 grounds of appeal, maintained that the PEPC panel erred the law and thereby reached a wrong conclusion when he dismissed his petition. He said that the panel wrongly evaluated the proof of evidence he adduced before it and occasioned a grave miscarriage of justice when it held that he did not specify polling units where irregularities occurred during the election, and the figures of votes or scores that were allegedly suppressed or inflated in favor of President Tinubu and the APC. Instead, that the PEPC overlooked evidence that established that President Tinubu was previously indicted and fined the sum of 460,000 US dollars in the USA over his involvement in the drug-related case. Imposition of a fine is not limited to a criminal conviction, as the word in law includes a civic forfeiture. Obi further argued in his appeal and urged the court to overturn Tinubu's victory. Atiku urged the Apex Court to admit a fresh evidence he obtained from the CSU, which he said would establish that President Tinubu tendered forged certificate to the INEC in aid of his qualification to participate in the election. State Counsel Chief Chris Uche San noted that though the 32-page document released on the orders of Judge Nancy McDonaldo of the District Court of Illinois, Eastern Division, Illinois, USA, and handed over to his client on October 2, was not pleaded, he urged the court to admit it in evidence in the interest of justice. Uche San stressed that the issue surrounding the certificate that Tinubu purportedly obtained from the CSU was weighty, saying that there is need for the Apex Court to focus on doing substantial justice in the matter instead of rejecting the evidence on the altar of technicalities. All right, we'll move to our next story, and of course, we're looking at Nigeria wins $11 billion P&ID case in UK court, and Justice Robin Knowles of the Commercial Courts of England and Wales has ruled in favor of Nigeria and squashed the enforcement of the $11 billion arbitration award in favor of Process and Industrial Developments P&ID Limited. President Bola Tinubu, who applauded the judgment, said the country's victory in court was for the long-exploited African continent. The judge, in a ruling delivered by email yesterday, upheld Nigeria's prayers on the grounds that the ill-fated gas processing contract was obtained by fraud. Recall that P&ID had entered into an agreement with Nigeria in 2010 to build a gas processing plant in Calabar, Cross River State, but the company said the deal collapsed because the Nigerian government did not fulfill its end of the bargain. Claiming Nigeria breached the term of the contract, P&ID took to legal recourse and secured an arbitral award against the country. However, a private arbitration tribunal had on January 31, 2017, ordered Nigeria to pay $6.6 billion to P&ID plus interest beginning from March 2013. Following the judgment, Nigeria applied for an extension of time and relief from sanctions. The application was granted by Judge Ross Cranston of the Business and Property Courts of England and Wales in September 2020. With the interest rates fixed at 7%, amounting to $1 million a day, the potential payment had accumulated to $11 billion before the verdict. Nigeria has alleged that the gas deal was a scam conceived to defraud the country. Lawyers representing the federal government told the court that P&ID officials paid bribe to secure contract. But P&ID denied the allegation and accused Nigerian government of false allegation and wild conspiracy theory. Reacting to the judgment yesterday, President Bola Tinubu applauded it, describing as victory for Africa. President Tinubu, in a statement issued by the Special Advisor on Media and Publicity, Adrian Gilale, said this landmark judgment proves conclusively that the nation states will no longer be held hostage by economic conspiracies between private firms and solitarily corrupt officials who conspire to extort and indebt the very nation they swear to defend and protect. Today's victory is not for Nigeria alone, it is victory for our long exploited continent and for the developing world at large, which has for too long been on the receiving end of unjust economic practices and overt exploitation. Nigeria is appreciative of the tremendous efforts of the defense team and acknowledges the role of the Federal Ministry of Justice and the Office of the Attorney General in the process of defending Nigeria's interests in this case, the president stated. All right, to move on to our next story. And our next story is on FEC approves a $5 billion annual humanitarian poverty alleviation trust fund. Now, the Federal Executive Council, FEC, approves the establishment of humanitarian and poverty alleviation trust fund as part of the administration's effort to cushion the economic hardship on vulnerable Nigerians. The Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Betta Edu, disclosed this while briefing State House correspondents at the end of the third council meeting presided over by President Bola Tinubu at the council chamber Presidential Villa, Abuja. Edu said that the fund was expected to garner up to $5 million annually. According to her, there will be a governing board that would supervise the implementation of the fund, which will be carefully worked out by members of the committee. She said it will involve the Minister for Finance and other ministers that are relevant to the process. This is a flexible form of financing that is supposed to help Nigeria adequately respond to humanitarian crises and challenges, as well as adequately address the issues of poverty in Nigeria. This, of course, is a victory for the poor and indeed would help bring succor, which the Renewed Hope agenda stands for. On the importance of the approval, she said, again, we are grateful to President Bola Tinubu today for the approval given for the creation of Humanitarian and Poverty Alleviation Trust Fund. This is a flexible form of financing that will help us get contributions from different sectors. We're going to have contributions from government, from the private sectors, development partners, individuals, philanthropic individuals, and other innovative form of crowdfunding and pooling of funds together. This is to allow for emergency response to a humanitarian crisis in Nigeria. Every other day we hear about crisis, the flood, and the rest of it. We need to be able to respond adequately as a country. Beyond this, the issue of poverty alleviation is one of the agendas of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu in its 8-point agenda, and we want to be able to tackle it headlong. On how much the government was looking at, Edu said, every year we hope to be able to raise at least $5 billion in this fund, and this is from the various sources I have mentioned, and even more. We are hopeful that with the creation of this funding, we can sit down with all the key stakeholders, including other ministries, and actually work out the full modality of implementation in Nigeria. Also briefing, the Minister of Solid Mineral Development, Dele Alake, said Council approved the draft policy for the solid mineral sector encompassing oil activities, operations, guidelines, regulatory framework, sourcing, mining, and all that dynamics in the sector. He said the approval empowered the ministry to act precisely on issues including security measures, combating illegal mining activities across the country and securing Nigeria's economic survival. Alake added, the solid mineral sector is critical to Nigeria's economic survival due to ongoing changes in the global oil market, the push for climate change, and the shift towards green energy. Illegal mining activities from artisanal miners to high level involvement are significant challenges. Reorganizing the security structure and engaging interagency cooperation to combat this menace. The approval today, as part of the policy, allows the Solid Mineral Ministry to act on all matters related to the regulation, management, operation, and the environmental sanitization of the solid mineral sector. This makes the sector more investor friendly, ensuring security and stability for investments and attracting both local and foreign investors. Moving on to our next story is subsidy removal, exchange rate unification have achieved desired objective, and that's coming from the president. And amidst the inflationary impact of the removal of petrol subsidy, President Bola Tinubu has indicated that the measure has achieved desired objectives. But leading economists and investment analysts faulted the position of the president, saying the economy is still struggling as the measures are yet to yield the desired positive impact on the economy. Speaking at the opening ceremony of the 29th edition of the annual Nigeria Economic Summit Group, NESG, Tinubu stated that in addition to the removal of the subsidy, the regime directed the unification of foreign exchange rates to stimulate economic growth. He said, to stimulate economic growth, we announced the end of a crippling fuel subsidy regime and the unification of foreign exchange rates. President Tinubu also said his government has introduced several other measures to revive the economy, including the 500 billion naira intervention to support small businesses and the agricultural sector, adding by January 2024, the new student loan program and consumer credit scheme will have come into effect. New and affordable homes will also be built at record pace. Tinubu, however, added, we have all felt the pain of these reforms. Soon we shall begin to reap the rewards. It is my hope that this summit will deliberate and profile yet more solutions to complement the programs mentioned above. Further on his regime's economic recovery effort, Tinubu said, to mobilize finance for sustainable development, we have simultaneously commenced an aggressive domestic and external mobilization of financial resources and capital from a wide range of partners. Among several initiatives, we are progressing forward with the development of wide-ranging reforms to our fiscal and tax policies to ensure an efficient, fair, and growth-friendly fiscal environment. To harness our human capital, we must protect the socio-economically vulnerable and vanquish forever the crippling multidimensional poverty affecting our land as we move aggressively to end hunger and protect all Nigerian children. All right, so let's take a look at Mr. and Mrs. before we go. And this morning, Mrs. seems to be speaking. She says, "Dear, it's a privilege to be a member of board of trustees of an institution like that. It makes me feel proud whenever your name is mentioned as member of BOT." And Mr. replies and says, "It's not that rosy, dear. BOT can also mean basket of troubles." And of course, trust Mr. and Mrs. They always have something for each other, and that's how we can take on today in the news. Remember that you can equally like, share, and subscribe on all our social media platforms showing on your screen. To find out today's stories, go to our website www.vanguardnj.com to find out more. I am Precious Chukudi, and thank you for watching.